Vittorio Vezzetti, pediatra italiano, rappresento a Rede Europea per la guarda partilhada chamada Colibri. A minha conferência será em inglês. In the last years, science has demonstrated the direct effects of loss of parental care and abuse of well-being of the children. For example, if genetically inclined, children will have in their lives a greater risk of panic disorders if they had a history of parental loss. Parental loss enter in the most authoritative review, scientific review. This is the bibliographic reference. Childhood parental loss is a truly environmental risk factor. It can account for a significant additional proportion. Okay, but now it's too deep genetic feature. But we must consider it that now in Western countries, what is the first parental loss? Is the divorce. We don't have war anymore, or less. I mean, more or less. So in Western countries, divorce of parental couple is actually the first cause of parental loss. Another interesting feature arrived on an important review last year has demonstrated a direct action of childhood adversity on chromosomes. Adverse childhood events are related to continued vulnerability among older adults, enhancing the impact of chronic stress factor. It means more psychiatric disorder when the children became adults. And only for abuse, now only for abuse, in the future we'll see, has been demonstrated even to lead an increase of metabolic disease, cancer, lung disease. For example, you have to consider it that in Italy, after the divorce, one child on three lose contact with one parent. Usually is the father, not always. But now we know even important influence of hormonal assessment of parental loss and childhood adversity. For example, on the production of oxytocin, the hormone of empathy and falling in love. Or for example, on the stress hormone, glucocorticoid receptor, is associated with childhood abuse. So, this is the first very important take-home message that I leave you here in Coimbra. Parental loss can cause even organic, important damage, not only intangible pain, the sufferance. No. The second take-home message is that shared equal custody would be a good instrument to prevent parental loss. It's on population and society, but really is a French review. In May, 1 month ago, there's a survey observed demonstrating that there's a less frequent loss of father-child contact after alternating residence, 1% of cases versus 21% who lose the contact with the father in maternal custody. But what's happened now? Well, during the 60s, the 70s, the 80 years in Portugal, in Italy, even now, the discussion on alternating custody was based only on theoretic models, because we don't have a so wide casuistic. In Italy, alternating custody doesn't exist. You cannot study it. By the end of 90 years, the scientists from USA, from Scandinavia, from Belgium, have begun to work on tangible features. It was finally possible to study quite wide casuistics of children living in equal alternating custody. In most of European countries, this is not actually possible, because the judge denied in a systematic way the alternating custody. So the debate changed. After more than 40 years, since the debate began, we can substitute the theoretical and ideological debates with a more concrete, more practical approach. This allows for evaluation of experience of countries, even big countries, Australia, for example, that have, like Italy and Portugal, an established history of joint alternating custody. In my meta-analysis that has been presented in the Italian Parliament on last February, I grounded on studies with some important characteristics, trying to go as more as possible away from the field of discussion, of claim. So, first one, I choose only research published on scientific reviews of international repute. Second point, very important, widespread enough to allow a statistical evaluation. With statistical evaluation, really, we cannot say, I have another opinion. We are going out from the field of the opinions. Without geographic connotation, not only USA, the most of research comes from USA, but this could create a sociological bias. So I choose research coming from all the world, I mean, 4 continents. Possibly with meta-analytic features, so it means critical analysis of other research. In the end, all the research involves more than 200,000 children in 4 continents. So with statistical validation, I think that is quite objective research. The first meta-analysis is a meta-analysis that every professional living in the world of family law should know, because it's by a historic point of view, is the first with a statistical validation of the outcomes. It's this meta-analysis of Robert Bauserman of Health Department, USA, Maryland. It compares 146 sole custody children versus 814 joint alternating custody. For Bauserman, is considered joint alternating custody at least 25% of time spent by parents who 25 up to 50, up to 50-50. And he finds better school behavior, higher self-esteem, feeling of more satisfaction about their own relation with parents. Okay? All these outcomes with statistical validation. The author follows a meta-analytic way, and he wants examine not only the outcomes, but even the possible effect or collateral situation, with 2 specific aims. Clear and statistical analysis of reports comparing children in sole and joint custody, and the second goal, the second aim, examine how relevant characteristics of population and studies might moderate the relationships between custody arrangements and outcomes. Bauserman meta-analysis included 33 research, 21 comparing physical joint custody, 25 up to 50, as I said earlier, versus sole custody. He has measured 7 different parameters: general psychic assessment, behavioral adjustment, emotional adjustment, self-esteem, family relationships, academic performance, psychic wellness until the divorce. What is very important to remark is that joint custody gave in the children better outcomes independently from external variance and identity of the person completing the measure. So it could be the father, the mother, the teacher, the physician. And this outcome with statistical validation. The parental conflict was smaller between the groups in joint custody. In the paper that the organization gave you, there's a small discussion about this feature, because even Bauserman wondered if this outcome can arrive, for example, from an auto-selection of this population. What is very important to notice is that a lower conflict between the parents could allow to foresee a better assessment. So what seemed to be very important was the joint custody, not the low level of the conflict. This is another important feature. The comparison between physical joint custody and children living in intact families didn't show any difference, qualitative or quantitative. This is another important research that it was not, this research came from Scandinavia, from Sweden, for sure. In Italy we don't do so important research. Jablonski and Lindberg, they want to study the risk behavior, the victimization, the mental distress among adolescents in the different family structures. And they notice, please, let's see the number. It means 15,428 children, 11, 13, 15 years old, about the use of drugs, alcohol, smoke, mental distress, victimization. The best outcomes of equal co-parenting had been on mental distress with statistical validation. But the children living in equal custody, they have better outcomes, even without statistical validation, to be honest, even for the use of drugs, alcohol, smoke, and victimization. In Australia, the Australian experience is very important. So, I don't understand very well the Portuguese, but I noticed that people told me in this psychologists today is that you are trying to collect data about alternating custody. But by the way, we have a continent like Australia with important experience. We have to introduce in our courts even this research. In Australia, co-parenting and shared custody when the parents don't agree, became first option in 2006. It means that if the parents don't agree, they go by the judge almost in default say 50-50. In few years, equal custody reached 16% of the children. What is very interesting is that there was a few people coming from the judge. It seems like the father means the mother saying, if you don't grant me at least 30%, I go by the judge, will give me 50. So these are the outcomes. The effect on conflicts are evident. The claims to family court decrease suddenly. Please, let's see. From, you can say 2006, it was 35,000. In a few years, it became 18,000. While the federal magistrates goes, it means all the claim by a generalist judge increase in the same time. So really the effect was only on the family court. Is the science manipulable? This is another important topic. An article from, because the Australian experience is very discussed, even claimed in all the world, an article from Political Science Department of Oxford University has affirmed that Australian experience has been negative because shared custody would have caused troubles in children with high conflict families, children under 4 years, so very small, and cases of abuse or violence. The article, I read the article doesn't report data or numbers. It talks exclusively about unclear, not specific demonstration of a task force for psychologists charged by government, Australian government, to evaluate the effects of shared custody after the approval of 2006. Let's read the original report. Point 1. Shared custody is not used for high conflict families. What do the Australian researchers write? The small high conflict nature of the sample means that care should be taken to generalize this finding because it was a question of only 36 families. So no statistical validation, no value. You cannot demonstrate anything with 36 families. And finally, excuse me, probably I've lost a slide. Okay, I've lost a slide, but even the same situation was for children under 4 years. Under 4 years, the sample was 26 children. 26 children. But the Australian researcher, honestly, they say, they admit that there was a lack of statistical power, but English, not. So finally, I went to examine the economic sponsor of this research of Oxford University, and I found that it was a charity well known for being against the introduction of shared custody in UK Van Nuffield Foundation. In the end, in Australia, the only correction has been to exclude from automatic shared custody only the cases with suspected violence or abuse. Okay, this is the slide. It was 26 minus. Honestly, the Australians said the numbers were inevitably small. Some findings have been treated speculatively. Longitudinal tracking of infants' care arrangement over time was also not possible because of a lack of statistical power. But the trick has been to forget in UK. This is another very important research issued last year, life satisfaction among children in different family structures, a comparative study of 36 Western societies involving 184,000 minors. Even in Portugal, you see, there was a little group, not really so very little, 1,500 minors even in Portugal. It published on Children and Society in last year. This paper wants to examine the difference in life satisfaction among children in different family structures, and especially it arrives at some important conclusion. Children living with both biological parents report anyway higher levels of life satisfaction than children living with a single parent or step-parent. So it means that, the traditional family are a reason to exist. But the children in joint physical custody reported significantly higher levels of life satisfaction, very close to inter-family children, than their counterparts in other types of non-inter-families. But controlling perceived family affluence, cleaning this outcome from economic feature, the difference between joint physical custody families and single mother or mother-stepfather became non-significant, even if remained higher. So it means that perceived family affluence, the feeling to have a good economic situation, was much higher in joint physical custody children. Okay, I show you a lot of research with statistical validation published a very important review in all the world without sociological bias, without sociological connotation, from Australia, from Scandinavia, after you enter a court. For example, Italian court. I show you some typical sentence decision of a typical Italian court. In accord to our jurisprudence, the court doesn't agree about time fragmentation, assuming it's destabilizing. The consequence is 2 weekends per month with the father. Court for Children of Milan. The changing of domicile and of managing of daily deal causes the loss of steady reference points. Alternating domicile can produce negative effects on minors. This sentence, it doesn't ground on some research on something different from the prejudice of the judge. Court for Children of Trieste last February, it's our steady jurisprudence not allowing the alternating custody, neither if the parents live in different flats or the same building. 3 meters of distance. And the father, in this case, lose the custody, the legal custody, just to have asked, because it has been demonstrated to don't care absolutely of the really paramount interest of the minor. So, in name of steadiness, the judge denied alternating weeks, 4 movements, but they allow 2 weekends, more 6 afternoons, for example, 8 means 16 movements. It is a quite wide contradiction. Equal custody in Europe. Okay. Every juridic. Now I'm leading a survey I just finished. I will present in Strasbourg, European Parliament, the next autumn. And this is a small, very small preview, because every system moves on superior interesse da crianza, traducido por criterios objetivos, paramount interest of the minors, every system, everywhere. But what is the paramount interest of the minors? If it changes, trespassing the border. In Sweden, equal custody is more than 30%. In Belgium, it's more than 20%. In France, it's 70%. But in Switzerland, it's less than 1%. But in Switzerland, you have even a canton, French-speaking, a French culture. It is completely different. So the sociological feature, in this case, doesn't have any influence, any moderation. This is the problem of the judge, because by cultural, sociological point of view, there's not a big difference from the canton of Switzerland speaking, French speaking, and the French. It's the same with other. I could do some other example. It is really interesting. Physical joint custody. Okay. Each system moves on the paramount interest of the minors, but completely different, because Sweden, Spain, Belgium, and Denmark, they allow a physical joint custody. It means I consider it more than 30% of time with parent number 2, while the French allow this physical joint custody for 15 up to 30% of the children. And Italy, Switzerland, Greece, Austria, Germany, Czech Republic, Slovakia, United Kingdom, Romania, and Portugal, physical joint custody is concerned much less than 15% of minors. So in medicine, this could not be acceptable. The fever starts at 38 degrees in the Alps, in Stockholm, in Athens, in London. This is one feature that I will bring to Strasbourg. The European children are discriminated in the front of a common event like the divorce of the parents according to their nationality. This is another feature. Nobody choose what are the best practice. I like to believe that the best practice are the practice from Sweden and not from Greece, for example. This is my opinion, supported by the research, by the way. But European Commission answered that they don't know anything about best practice. They don't know anything. It's a pure juridic problem of the single member states. It's not like that. I told you, it is another take-home message, very important, that today, this year, now, the interest of the minor is not anymore a juridical, a sociological, psychological problem, even a biomedical feature. Now that we have a lot of medical literature about this situation, it's possible to individuate the best practice. The gold standard. In Belgium now, the judge must say he should give the equal custody to everybody. He could say not, but he must specify why not. The outcome is more than 20% of Belgian children now live in equal custody. So in most European cases, these research are really not really important. The juridic opinion replaces the scientific evidence and proved experience of research. I mean, all nations like Sweden, Belgium, or Australia. By the way, in Italy, I have created a little group of professionals, psychologists, even lawyers, that now they like to attach to the juridic act my research that has been translated in 10 languages, even Portuguese, that you find in your papers, the paper that the organization gave you, and some other research. So I must not defend the father, the mother. I start from the paramount interest of the minors, but consider it, evaluated on the basis of scientific literature. It changed a lot, and some judge has demonstrated to be open. Now the official position of Italian psychology is that alternating domicile should be the first option. Until now they just say, okay, this is the psychology, but the judge or me decide for not. But sometimes now they are a little bit opening. But what's really the problem? The problem at the root is philosophical. We have had René Descartes, Cartesio. He has divided the world of the science, the world of the nature, from the world of the man. So the literature, the right. Cartesio, I mean, he has created a thick wall between the world of the science and the world of the right. This is much less evident in Scandinavia, USA. They didn't know Cartesio, where the scientific outcomes enter more easily the courts. For example, the test of DNA, that everybody knows it is very important. Okay, all the world was updated that existed this new test in '85. Few months after, it was in United Kingdom, USA, in the court. In Italy, you had to wait 5 years. So, I mean, because we love a more theoretical approach. So our judicial system moves forward, or sometimes I think behind, the paramount interest of the children. But often we ask spontaneously ourselves, how was this paramount interest defined in the beginning? For sure, not following the scientific evidence, the stranger experience, the international literature. Why not? Because in Italy we have found 57 kinds of pre-printed schedule orienting the divorce when the couple didn't enter the court yet. So you believe to enter in the court. I mean, to open a judicial situation after we have discovered that in some court, the president of the court take out from the drawer a paper, is always all written. So, I mean, it's already written that the minor is granted to the mother, the father could see. I mean, he didn't listen to anyone. What I mean, in what I've discovered in my survey in Europe, I mean, even in Sweden there's a discrimination of male parenting. It doesn't mean to be against or with the father. I'm just talking about parenting. Almost all the Western world plays the same role when we talk about male parenting, but the difference is the courage of the mission. In this case, I must admit that France can give a lesson to everybody, because a governative report from France has highlighted that French judicial system shows index of discrimination of parents according to the sex. The report talks even about dissuasion to fatherhood. It is a governative source, I mean. The report claims that although the law on joint custody, only 14% of minors have physical joint custody. Now it's 17. It only 7% of custody is granted to the fathers. This is courage to admission. In Italy, no. In Italy, we sole custody for fathers 0.8 after separation, 1.9 after the divorce, after 3 years, e alternating custody until 2 years, we must say, tout va bien, Madame la Marquise, everything is fine, and the judge absolutely neutral about the parenting. What do the children think in conclusion? This is a very interesting research led by two psychologists from USA, William Fabricius and Jeffrey O. At the first year of psychology, the teenager entering the university, the college, he collected the data from 820 respondents, and they say that children of diverse couple, and they say that they wanted to have spent more time with their father as they were growing up. And the living arrangement they believe was the best was living equal time, approximately equal time with each parent. It was real for 93% between young who really had experimented such a kind of custody, and 70% between other ones. This is a research. Young adults' perspective on divorce. This is the opinion of Italian judge. The children, this is an important document of the Superior Council of Judge. The children, especially teenagers, are lazy and they prefer one living reference point, even more because they don't have the same personal belongings in both the houses. So personal belongings are worth more than one parent. In the end, I close with a little anecdote. Mongolian people, is my golden standard about alternating domicile because they are nomadic population. Even now, 80% of this quite wide population, 2 million of inhabitants, they don't have a steady house. They work now with motorhome, or even now with the horse across the desert, across the Gobi. We know it was a very fierce, a very cruel population. They cut the ears in the time of Genghis Khan to count the victim of their wars. But they say, since a so cruel, a so primitive population, since 2000 years, say that if a couple doesn't agree, it's better to divorce. But you cannot other from the tribal group, like in most of Western countries, because in a so wild nature, it will be weaker the group, and the man will die alone for sure in the wild nature. So he changed only the tent. He remains in the same tribal group. He changed only the tent. During the night, he will not be husband anymore, but during the day, he will still be a parent. So the Mongolian people, since 2000 years, say even, is happy the parent won't children run his arms, even when the hands are empty. Because that day I joined, that day, only that day, we could say to have been a good parents in the name of our children. Thanks.